புதுமையே போற்றுவோம். புதுவை பல்கலைக்கழகமே உன்னை வாழ்த்துவோம். வங்க கடலலை தாளாட்டும் ஞான சூரியன் உதிக்கும் இடம்.
இது எங்கள் புதுநெறி காட்டும் உலகம். என்னாலும் தொடரும் பொழியும் ஆசிரியர், அதில் தினமும் நனையும் மாணவர்கள்.
இதில் அன்று புதுவை பல்கலைக்கழகம் அறிவின் காகம் தனியின் சோலை அகில போற்றும் கல்வி சாலை. மனித வளவே என்று முயல புனித சேவை தொடருதே. பல்கலைக்கழகம் என்றும் வளர்ந்திட நாமும் வழிபடுவோம். கல்வி சேவைகள் யாவும் காலமும் தொடர்ந்திட நாளும் வேண்டிடுவோம். புதுவை புதுவை புதுமையே போற்றுவோம்.
புதுவை பல்கலைக்கழகமே உன்னை வாழ்த்துவோம்.
Now I request Professor R. Nalini, Head of the Department of Social Work, Pondicherry University, to welcome the gathering.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Shaheen. Good afternoon, everyone. Dear distinguished speakers, guests and participants, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all for the international webinar on Gandhian approach to social work praxis, the way forward, being organized by the Department of Social Work on the 27th of August. We are starting exactly at 2:30 now. And it's my privilege to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurneet Singh, a renowned academic administrator and an internationally reputed expert in the field of corrosion science and smart materials. Our Vice Chancellor began his academic career as a lecturer in the Department of Chemistry, University of Delhi in 1976, rising to become a professor about 20 years ago. All through his career, he has contributed to the administration of University of Delhi and other public institutions while maintaining a very high level of research output, both in terms of quality and quantity. Thank you, sir, for taking out time of your busy schedule to be with us. We are very happy to welcome you, sir, for this webinar. I wholeheartedly welcome our Director, Studies, Educational Innovation and Rural Reconstruction, Professor Balakrishnan, who is always supportive to us in all our initiatives. Sir is always very particular that nobody wastes time in his office. Time and again, I mentioned that the minute we go there, in 5 minutes, maximum 10 minutes, he will make sure our queries are answered. So that's one thing I really would like to learn from you, sir. Thank you for being with us today. Welcome you, sir. And I'm very glad to welcome our Director, Culture and Cultural Relations, Professor Rajiv Jain, who has always shown keen interest in our department activities, especially the outreach activities and rural camp and other initiatives. And he also ensures that we document our activities very well. So thank you, sir, for being with us, and we are happy to welcome you for this webinar. And our Dean, School of Social Sciences and International Studies, Professor Murthy, has been instrumental in us organizing this webinar. Thank you, sir. Without your initiative, we would not have done this to this level. Thank you for helping us in every step in organizing this webinar. And we're very privileged to welcome you for this webinar, sir. Thank you very much once again. And we are very fortunate to have two eminent speakers today. It is a great honor for me to welcome Professor P. Jayanthan Govinder from School of Social Sciences, University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. He's a renowned academician, and he will be speaking on Gandhi's treasures of values. It's a very relevant theme, sir, for today, and especially in the social work context. And sir is very well known in the field, and we are all very keenly waiting to listen to you, sir. Welcome to our webinar. Thank you. You could take time, and you were very particular about, sir was very particular. The minute we asked for his speech, he agreed. He immediately sent us the abstract, and he was very forthcoming. And thank you, sir. It was a nice interaction with you, and we look forward to listening to your wonderful lecture. And I'm also happy to welcome Mr. David Dayalan Gengan, Chairperson, Pietermaritzburg Gandhi Memorial, South Africa. Sir is, when you look at his profile, it's interesting, it's varied, it's diverse. I think he's more of an activist also, and we are very keen to listen to his wonderful lecture. He will be speaking on 7th June 1893, the night that changed the world. He has in fact spoken in various forums, and I've already read a few of his speeches also. So welcome you, sir, for this webinar. And I take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to all the faculty members, heads, deans from within our university and also from other universities. And I'm also happy to welcome our own faculty members, Professor Shaheen Sultana, who is a coordinator of this event, and she has taken really a lot of initiatives. She's put a lot of efforts. So thank you, Shaheen, for all your efforts, and I'm happy to welcome you and our other faculty members, Dr. Anbu, Dr. Satish, Dr. Shankar, Dr. Iftakhar Alam, and Dr. Ilamurugu. And I'm very much happy to welcome each and every participant, the scholars from our department and other departments. I'm also happy to welcome students from all over the country and our own department and our own university. I'm sure you will benefit a lot from that because we are focusing on the praxis. Like why Gandhiji is always, even now, an inspiration is because he just didn't stop with preaching. He practiced all of whatever he tried to say. Whatever he said was put into practice. And if you read his books, as he says, my life is my message. So I think that is the best way we can inspire, and we social workers need inspirations for us. We need examples, and that is why I think this seminar will be, the webinar will be very useful to all our students and for all of us. It will be a good learning experience. I hope students, you will be inspired, and you'll bring the change that this world is looking for through you. With these few words, I thank this opportunity, and now it's over to Professor Shaheen.
Thank you, Professor Nalmi, for formally welcoming the August gathering and also for spearheading the team for this event. We all like to share to the August audience here that we have organized this webinar in a very short period under the leadership of our Dean, Professor Murthy, and under the leadership of the Head of the Department, Professor Nalmi. Thank you, ma'am. Now, we would formally welcome Professor Gurneet Singh, sir, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University, to deliver the presidential address. However, before that, a short CV note about him. Professor Gurneet Singh is a renowned academic administrator and an internationally reputed expert in the field of corrosion science and smart materials. He has also taken over as the Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University. He began his academic career as lecturer, assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry, University of Delhi in 1976, rising to become a professor almost 20 years ago. All through his career, he has been distinguished by the successful manner in which he has contributed to the university administration of both high-privileged central universities, the University of Delhi and Pondicherry University. He has held several academic and administrative assignments, and his portfolios, to mention a few, are the positions of Proctor, the Head of the Department, the Member of the Executive Council, and numerous other administrative positions in the University of Delhi, besides serving as Officer on Special Duty and also Principal of Deshbandhu College. He has been also on high-level committees of the UGC, the DBT, CSIR, and several other public institutions. He has also served as a chair professor at Lingua University, Tapai, where he was specially invited to start collaborative research. And he's also been as a visiting scientist to many countries, which includes Hungary, Japan, Germany, Italy, Australia, Singapore, Korea, Thailand, and Kenya. He is oft-decorated academician who has received many honors like the Meritorious Contribution Award, the Annapurna Award, the membership of the Royal Society of Chemistry, London, the Fellowship of CEST, and the Electrochemical Society of India. He is, of course, and no doubt, an inspiring teacher and mentor of research who has guided 14 MPhil and PhD scholars, around 50 in number, several of the resulting contributions which have received accolades and best paper awards at both the international and the national forums. At the time of moving to Pondicherry University, we are very proud to share that Professor Gurneet Singh was personally supervising 9 major R&D projects, which is worth over 7.5 crores, and he's authored around 150 research papers, of which a majority are in high-impact international journals. We are very proud and privileged to have you, and it's us, sir. On to you for the presidential address, for around 400 delegates who have registered in the webinar, and many others who are waiting and watching in the YouTube channel to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shahin. Our international guests, Professor Jayanathan Govindan and Professor David Gangan from South Africa. South Africa has a very special place when we talk about our Gandhian history and Gandhian philosophy, because it was in South Africa that the real spark was kindled in Mahatma Gandhi's mind, and then the rest everybody knows. Therefore, I extend a very special welcome to our two guests who have joined us from South Africa. Then our Director of Studies, Dr. Balakrishnan, Director of Culture, Dr. Rajiv Jain, Head of the Department, Professor Nalini, and Coordinator of the seminar, Professor Shahin, and Dean of the Faculty, who probably would have given them a direction that what exactly should be done, Professor Murthy, all other colleagues who are here from our university and from other places. I'm delighted to be here for two reasons. One, that this seminar involves Gandhian approach to social work, which you would have all studied, was the starting point of what exactly social work should be. Well, if you date back in our own religious philosophy, social work always played a very important role. But then it, in between, when we passed through the Mughal era and other regimes, this became a forgotten entity, and we started moving towards more of a slavery region. And what exactly should be done, people never had the real guidance about what way one should go about it. So it was only when Mahatma Gandhi came on the scene and he started non-cooperation movement. In fact, that is where our people learned that there can be another weapon which can be used for fighting our causes, which will be a very forceful weapon ultimately. This is where the Gandhian philosophy started, and when you read more about it, I'm sure our international experts from South Africa would bring this to highlight, that it was Mahatma Gandhi who gave this idea of village as a unit. His thinking was that if a country has to really progress, you have to start looking at the very smallest unit, and that unit in our country is a village. If you take that as a model and start converting one by one, you'll find a country will be on the road to an economic stability and on the road to becoming a very forceful democracy. If village is attended to, one will realize that the whole country would automatically be attended to. Mahatma Gandhi, by taking village as a unit, he started this process of how best to bring out a change. And he showed it by example that one should start working with one's own hands. He never shied away from doing anything. He used to even mend his own clothes. He would clean his own washrooms. And this is what he ultimately taught everybody. And that is where the feeling of work is worship. No work is lesser, no work is smaller, no profession is smaller. This philosophy started coming into our country, and people started realizing that whatever you can do with your own hands would ultimately lead to a quality work. And that is the real ethos of social work. That is that rather than depending upon somebody, you can organize your own teams to help the society. If everybody depends upon what our government is going to do, what our administrators are going to do, then probably no change will take place. And if rather than looking at somebody else for help, we team up as groups, we make our own smaller groups and start working for the betterment of society, that kind of a social work ultimately would lead to a real progress. And that is what Gandhian philosophy teaches us. Rather than dependent on somebody, we should be self-independent. We should be able to do everything on our own. So this is what has to be brought to the attention of our youngsters. Our youngsters are good readers, but they are not. I will not put them in that category of West readers. If they are in that category, they'll be very happy. They'll be very keenly reading the Gandhian thoughts. Gandhian philosophy is relevant in practically all fields. If you talk about economy, if you talk about politics, if you talk about cleanliness, if you talk about management, Gandhian philosophy has always been relevant and will remain relevant. And therefore, this is what our youngsters need to learn. Unfortunately, the problem with our youngsters at the moment is that if they are into whatever subject they are in, they'll be only focusing on that, and they will not look at what is happening in and around. Therefore, they need to, if somebody is in physics or in microbiology or whatever subject you are in, you also need to look at the greatness of Mahatma Gandhi. How is it that he gave his thoughts about everything? And with that, I think we not only gained independence, we gained a kind of self-esteem which was lacking before Mahatma Gandhi took over. And that is what we need to pay our attention to. I will urge all the youngsters to read books about Mahatma and emulate the lifestyle that he had during his career, the way he used to manage time, the way he used to write his articles, the way he used to do reading, the way he used to look at religions, the way he used to look at society. So all those things are very urgently needed, and in fact, they are more relevant in the present days. We were all feeling very depressed when this pandemic hit us, and the way we have faced it, the way we have overcome this with these online activities, I think we have done a good job, and we are very successful in tackling this. Now, this social work, from a point of view of Gandhiji's thought, becomes all the more important in the days of pandemic. This is the time when we don't have to depend upon anyone else but on our own selves, on our smaller units, and face this. And if we follow Gandhian principles, I think we'll be in a position to fight this pandemic much better than what one can do otherwise. So I'm very happy that the Department of Social Work has taken a lead in organizing this webinar, which is being very heavily attended by so many from all over. And I have no doubt in my mind that this will be a wonderful lead in the direction of giving something very positive in tackling the present pandemic, and will show a right kind of light to our youngsters in particular, that what way we can improve our society in the shortest possible time and in the best possible manner. So I wish the webinar a grand success, and also wish our two professors from South Africa, with which we have very historical links, Professor Jayanathan and Professor David, who have joined in from there, that they'll have a very good, wonderful interactions with our youngsters here during this webinar. Thank you so very much for inviting me over here, and I wish the webinar a grand success and give my compliment to the department for organizing this. Thank you so very much. God bless all of you.
Thank you very much, sir. We are very happy that you were able to throw light on Gandhiji's thoughts and his vision as to how village as a unit was very pivotal for the development of the society, how one's own hands is better than expecting from the administration or the government or any other civic body, and how the students have to extend themselves beyond their disciplines to look into the welfare of their society. Thank you very much, sir, for your thoughtful words. Now, we move on to the next speaker. We now invite Dr. Anbu, the Associate Professor from the Department of Social Work, to formally welcome Professor S. Balakrishnan. On to you, Dr. Anbu, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Honorable Vice Chancellor, dignitaries, invitees, and student friends, good afternoon to all of you. I deem it a privilege to introduce Professor Balakrishnan, Director Studies, Educational Innovations and Rural Reconstruction of our university. Professor Balakrishnan is a renowned academician in the field of earth sciences, having more than 30 years of experience in this field. He has completed his PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University in the year 1986 by conducting an extensive research study about the cliff belt of Kolar in Karnataka. He has done his postdoctoral fellow in the State University of New York at Stony Brook, USA, and started off his academic career as a lecturer in Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, and joined Pondicherry University in the year 1997. Professor Balakrishnan was honored with the prestigious Post-Law Research Award by the University of Roorkee. He has published more than 60 research papers, 120 conference and seminar proceedings. 14 scholars have successfully completed their PhD under his guidance. Professor Balakrishnan has held important administrative positions like HOD, Dean of School of Physical, Chemical and Applied Sciences, Dean Research, and Coordinator of IQAC of our university. He has made significant contributions in developing the geochemical lab and in establishing and managing a state-of-the-art national facility for isotope geochemistry, played a proactive role in starting 5 years integrated MSc program in applied geology, physics and chemistry, and as the Director of Research, improved the administrative procedures of research projects in our university. He has visited many countries as part of his academic and research activities, such as Japan, Italy, USA, and Germany. He has held many academic positions and responsibilities and is having membership and fellowship in eminent academic bodies. We are very happy to have such an eminent academician as part of today's webinar. On behalf of the Department of Social Work, I welcome you, sir, and I invite you to deliver the felicitation address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, respected Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurneet Singh, Director Professor Rajiv Jain, Professor Krishnamurthy, Professor Murthy, who is our Dean of the School of Social Sciences and International Studies, and another department of Department of Social Work, Professor Nalini, Professor Sahib Sultana, other faculty members, and international guests, particularly Professor Jayanathan Govindan and Professor David Jengan. Very warm good afternoon to all of you, and it is indeed a great pleasure for me to be associated with this webinar on Gandhian, this thing. And we have been conducting a series of webinars. Our Professor Murthy is the nodal person who was entrusted with the task of conducting this thing. And last 1 year, he has organized a series of seminars and webinars. Earlier, before March 24th, we had a number of seminars and conferences. Later, because of the COVID-19 situation, it has been changed to webinars. Okay, so I think this is the third one after, I think in the last 1 month, we are having it on Gandhi. Am I right, Professor Murthy? This is the third event we are organizing successfully. Fourth, yeah, I stand corrected. This is the fourth one. And interestingly, it is the social work department which has taken up this task, particularly on the practice aspect of the Gandhian, philosophies or Gandhian values. So this is always, preaching is easy, practice is difficult. That is the most difficult part. As we know, in sciences also, we have two general category of scientists. One general category of scientists, we call them as theoreticians. They only using pen and pencil in olden days. Nowadays, using at the best computer, they used to theorize. What should be the thing. Theoretical scientists they are called. And then the other group is whatever theory these theoretical scientists have proposed. They have proposed some theory, then to verify whether the theory is correct or not is our experimental scientists. These are the people who do the experiments and confirm, or the theory is either confirmed or not confirmed, or some changes are made on the theory. So generally, broadly speaking, we have scientists also, experimental scientists and theoretical scientists. Okay. So generally, we used to joke that it is easy to be a theoretical scientist, because you don't need much, and you don't have to manage many facilities, and you can just be happy to sit and do. And in general, you will find that the theoretical scientists are more in India. Particularly, you will see that it is more easy because of we don't need very elaborate laboratory facilities. Whereas experimental sciences is difficult, But this is one aspect, and rarely you will find a scientist who is both theoretician and experimentalist. That is very rare, because that is very difficult. You have to do both, theorize and also try to do the experiment. But in the social, sciences sphere, or in the humanistic realm of affairs, somebody coming up with a theory and practicing both, like Mahatma, that is the most difficult aspect, because it is easy to say than done. So that way, analyzing these concepts of how in social and humanistic realms, how the theory and practice can go together, and how that can be made to happen, in a way, in a very simplistic way. Our Mahatma Ji has proved that it is possible. This is possible. That is something which is great. And this seminar will be exploring these aspects, and try to have more our society also. If people can practice, like in the beginning of this last 2-3 years, we had this practice called Swachh Bharat, So where it has become like a people's movement over a period of time. Initially, it was proposed by central government, but later people in our country, whenever they find something, they don't throw the things now just like that outside, or if they find something, some material is lying over, then they try to remove it, or they try to put it in the dustbin. So the Swachh Bharat has taken an initiative on Gandhian lines, So which makes the country, which makes our surroundings more cleaner. So Swachh Bharat is nothing but a Gandhian, one of the small aspect of a Gandhian thing, which is now put into real life use. So like this, if all these Gandhian values are put to use, as our Vice Chancellor rightly said, this during COVID-19, if you practice these things, automatically the COVID-19 will not touch us. We will keep the COVID-19 far from our surroundings. So that is what is important, and I also appreciate the social work department having chosen such a very timely and very important topic at this time of crisis. So I congratulate them and wish a grand success of this event. Thank you very much, and I hope our international guests have a pleasant, interaction with our people who are listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for also spelling out the fact that theory versus practice is the main focus of our department, also supporting us in all our endeavors, program after the other. In between, we had to attend to Dr. Jayanthan, so a slight deviation with the scope of the webinar to be discussed now. So a very good afternoon to one and all of you. I'm here to present the scope of today's webinar. So this webinar began with the initiation of a Dean, School of Social Sciences and International Studies, Pondicherry University, Professor P. Murthy, who also happens to be the nodal officer of the 150th birth anniversary celebrations of Mahatma Gandhi, who actually initiated this idea of having a host of webinar series in our school and across the university. The idea was shared immediately with our head, Professor Nalini, who then immediately called out for a faculty meeting, and then the plan of action was rolled out without wasting much time. We are here amidst you all to host this in our department, and we're looking forward in this webinar, which is a big challenge. We all know, respected dignitaries here and colleagues and scholars and students, that Mahatma Gandhi's life and legacy is remembered by people across the world, not only on his 150th birth anniversary, but all throughout the year. His humanity, his ideals, his non-violent resistance have been an inspiration to the world. This event is not only being commemorated in India, but all across the countries in the world. It's a great pride for everyone in our country. We, at the Department of Social Work, Pondicherry University, are very much interested to host this event for two main reasons. One, as we all know, there has been a grievance that social work literature has been predominantly borrowed from the West, but henceforth not. Social work literature has also conceptualized from multidisciplinary perspectives, which is also predominantly from the West. Now, not further. So there is a tremendous momentum which is picking up in our country to explore from within, and also we do not want to miss chance in this direction. India, with its rich heritage, civilization, tradition, philosophers, thinkers, spirituality, and many more, can be a great treasure for the social work literature, and this is a step towards inventing on the same. We hope and we achieve, with the blessings of all the authorities, of the Dean and the head of the department and all other colleagues, we will be able to generate a whole amount of indigenous literature from our country, from our leaders, from our thinkers, from our reformers, and this webinar is an initiation towards that. Many people from across disciplines contribute to our profession, and we are integrated to multiple disciplines within the school and even outside the school. And this is a noble initiative to introspect within, to find out what all treasures we have in our own country with all the people whom I have now mentioned. And this initiation will be with efforts from the international speakers who will be joining with us today, and also other fellow delegates who will be contributing towards this. I hope and I strongly believe that we all are towards this momentum where we rediscover the indigenous literature and contribute much more positively to social work literature. Thank you very much. Now I invite Dr. C. Satish Kumar, Assistant Professor from the Department of Social Work, to welcome our Dean, Professor P. Murthy. On to you, Dr. Satish, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam. Respected Vice Chancellor, respected Directors of Pondicherry University, respected guests from abroad, and the Head of the Department of Social Work, and Professor Shahin, the coordinator of this event, and dear scholars and students, and all other participants. Very good evening, one and all. I am happy to introduce our Dean, School of Social Sciences and International Studies, Professor P. Murthy, and he is a person, I can say personally, is very calm and quiet and very friendly to move with all younger faculties like me. And Professor also is a nodal officer of 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Sir is holding PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he has done on the topic of politics of nuclear weapon free zone. And Sir has got several awards like Ambassador for Peace Award, Who is Who in Asia, and Top 100 Educators of 2012, to name few. His area of specialization being international relations, peace, disarmament, defense, and security studies. The contribution he is continuing to add onto the field is commendable. And I'm happy to welcome our Professor Murthy to this webinar. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Ari, should I start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you can start, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am personally, I have become emotional now. See, the history of everyone, of course, to be remembered. Our Vice Chancellor very clearly stated that the younger generation needs to read more and more on Mahatma. The reading habit of the world today, the American Reading Association says, becoming very, very, very less. Nobody is reading these days. We are living in a digital world. You look out the life setting of Mahatma Ji. Mahatma was born in 1862, 69. That time, the Suez Canal was opened. Karl Marx published Das Kapital. It was a very critical situation, actually, the birth of Mahatma Gandhi. Just look at his childhood. Although he is from a royal family system, he encountered so many hurdles with family people, friends, and then his classmates. So many complications he faced. He was a very ordinary person, to the core, very simple man. Never imagined the way that he would become like this. It was in June 7th, 1893, a very important day that took him to the highest flight from where his journey of non-violence, peace and non-violence started. Because of a push that he had from the time, that push took him out. Having first class ticket, was humiliated. He could not say anything. He went to South Africa to fight for the Muslim. He want to earn money. He was a pioneer, a business community. He was so conscious about earning money. He went with that dream. But there was some different story. He was forced to read the human history of South Africans, especially the Indians, settled Indians. People settled down South Africa. I know my friend David Juncan and Jayanathan would agree with me. They took me to different settlements of Indian people. I found still the same historical touch there. I was feeling as if Gandhi was moving around there, even still. The way that we went into Peter Mattisburg, the place where Mahatma Gandhi pushed out the train, Peter Mattisburg, the train, the station, the same dark look they maintained in such a way that everyone go into the railway station, they look as if they are in 1893. Such a historical monument they are keeping there. And that incident, Mahatma Gandhi had in mind, and he was moving around the Indian settlers. Parsi people were there, Muslims there, Hindi speaking, Tamil speaking, Gujarati speaking, and most of the people from Muslim community, they will never say that they are from Indians. They will say, we are from Arab world. Persian, they will say, some people from other community, they will say, we are from Persia. Farsi will say, they are from Persian country. To escape from the discrimination, they used to call coolies, Samis, because in Tamil, we instill in rural area, you go to rural area of India, especially Tamil Nadu area, Sami means for feudals, landlords, the coolies working in the field, they will call them Sami. Sami is equal to God, the creator. Mahatma was very much thinking of that. Mahatma is called coolie forester. Was humiliated. Mahatma was not allowed to wear turban. Very pathetic situation he realized. Then he thought the money earning mindset transformed him to be a social worker. That is the case. He wanted to be a social worker, the service for humankind. That made him realize a fact that the community has to have a unanimity, especially in the welfare side. So everyone is dependent. Their health, their welfare, their economy, their politics, all interdependent. The escape for Indians should be the escape for South Africans. That is how he started his journey. The money earning mindset changed. Mahatma turned to be a social worker. I'm very happy social work department came forward. When I proposed this, they said, sir, we will be happy to handle this. I made every department of our school to conduct seminars in connection with 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. That was my dream earlier when I was not dean. When I became dean, first proposal, I'm happy to say the cultural director motivated me. Cultural director and myself, we spoke. And I said, sir, we are planning to involve every department. It's not that Murthy sir alone has to do. Our Professor Gurneet should only give leadership. All should be leaders. Professor Gurneet always says that everyone should be leader. Everyone should be a force to be reckoned. We are in the learning process, teaching and learning process, such a responsible process actually. As I told yesterday, when I was talking in Central University of Tamil Nadu, I was talking about post-COVID-19 world order and the Mahatma way. I highlighted 3 important situations. I want to highlight in this occasion also because it is so fitting. In 1560s, Shakespeare, a great man Shakespeare, was talking about ignorance, escaping from ignorance. What to do? Humankind has to escape from ignorance. After 300, 400 years, a gentleman called 1794, I recall it, 1794, great personality, Immanuel Kant talks about escaping from immaturity, the inherent immaturity of humankind. Understanding was erected, Shakespearean period, and even then, people were supposed to be ignorant, immature. That was the case that Immanuel Kant was highlighting. And Mahatma, after 300-400 years, said 2 things very important: self-realization and self-reform. I'm just saying this because he has given solution for humankind. If you are self-realizing man, your setting will be changed. Your way of looking at the world will be changed. Your perception will be changed. If you don't reform yourself, you cannot contribute anything for the society. That is the greatest social service that Mahatma Gandhi did. And that is the greatest divide of the school, the greatest creation of the schools of thought that took every schools advocated by various scholars earlier in the box of Mahatma Gandhi. Very important dynamic box that Mahatma constructed based on self-realization and self-reform. To be a change, you be a change. Everyone in the revolutionary process, I always tell the evolutionary concept put in revolutionary mode, the real revolution will take place. That is what advocated by great revolutions, starting from English Revolution to Bolshevik Revolution. All the revolutions were put in the revolutionary mode with the evolutionary ideas, whereas Mahatma Gandhi tanked the entire thing. He put revolutionary ideas in evolutionary mode. Such a great change. Nobody could challenge Mahatma Ji. The Das Kapital of Karl Marx was very much taken back seat. When you compare with the Indian Home Rule, the book written by Mahatma Ji while traveling towards London to South Africa, okay, Indian Home Rule, yes, Swaraj, Kim Swaraj book, replaced the Das Kapital book. The second largest it was remaining till 2010. Now the first book of the world, the most sold out book of Mahatma is, Indian Home Rule. Urban, a great historian, Arnold Toynbee says, without Indian civilization, no civilization can help the world. I'm proud to say that. I'm Indian. We are all having a greatest strength. Mahatma made us realize about it. In the civilization aspect, Mahatma talks about the sustainable society. Mahatma never left anything, as Professor Gurneet Singh was highlighting. Nothing was left. Mahatma touched everything. He marked and he stood as a greatest mark for the subject matter. Customer relations, nobody can skip Mahatma Ji. Customers are kings. First time in the world, Mahatma only stated, customers are kings. They should be treated like kings. You go to Western society in any malls, you will find customers are kings. He was also rated to be a guru, management guru. Such a great personality for him that we have been contributing from our side in order to proliferate ideas among younger generations. Young people more and more, as our Vice Chancellor stated, read more and more on Gandhiji, at least for self-realization and self-help. If you are not doing it, the progress that you are making is not going to be progress. There is a theory called Entropy Theory. Mahatma, even that was very greatly treated by Mahatma Ji. Entropy, generally all the scientists and all the socialists understand the orderlessness, maybe, or orderly things creating order, or orderless order creating order. Entropy, the dynamic structure with which the scientific community looked at from material science as well as human science, put in a box. Mahatma very clearly understood various propositions advocated by various scholars of the world. For everything he will clarify. Everything will go and clarify. Even for small child, he will go, am I right? He said to a pressman, I have not discovered anything. I am simple man. Nothing discovered by me. I have not found any isms. Everything is available. I came across a phenomenon. That happened to be, that statement happened to be, read by Einstein. He said, Mahatma Ji, you are the discoverer. Ahimsa is the best discovery in the human history. I have not done E is equals to MC square is nothing in front of Ahimsa. I'm sorry, I'm taking more time. So such a kind of personality that we are involving in, and we more and more we have to talk about Mahatma Ji in the even 21st century. It's almost 2 decades over now. 3rd decades we are entering. The United Nations is expecting more from Mahatma Ji. We have also proposed to have post-COVID world order, especially COVID-19 world order. It is being very much highlighted in the context of United Nations General Assembly's resolutions. I'm happy to say that we have represented from our university the simple man. Because of Gurneet Singh, I went there, attended a very big global meet organized by our David Jenkins. We were so happy that you are creating such a great ideas, and that has to be proliferated among not only Indian community, the entire community of the world. We are all for welfare of all. We are for welfare of all. So We are for Sarvodaya. So we have to be very simple in thinking. Our way of looking at should be so sustainable, so that the sustainable society can be built as United Nations has been thinking from the 1992 onwards. Human development has to be in a sustainable mode. Putting everything into sustainable mode is very tough. We have been doing from Gandhian side. Gandhian movements has been doing, and we are so successful to this extent. Now we have come to now United Nations is realizing about the ideas that given by Mahatma Ji in the name of UNMDG, Human SDG, and India is realizing Mahatma Gandhi, rural employment act and all contribution of Mahatma Ji. Mahatma Gandhi cannot be forgotten. So with this, I think I should not extend too much. I expect my friends, students, friends who are very much taking me to different parts of South Africa, and they were really enjoying with me my kind of thinking and their kind of thinking of colleagues, and we were very happily moving around there. I'm happy that they all agreed and they came to address through webinar. Otherwise, I wanted to have a big seminar here this month. I'm happy that our Vice Chancellor, a director, and the cultural director, they all joined to, support me. Without them, I am nothing actually. It's not for, strategically I'm saying, technically I'm simple man, I don't expect anything. That's what I'm saying. I'm very happy that our team is doing well. Till now, we reached around 2,000 under the leadership of our Professor Gurneet Singh. For the last 2 months now, I'm saying, we reached for about 5,600 when we started this, this movement and 150th anniversary seminars in JN Auditorium. I used to highlight this. Now that we are reaching around 2,000 students, and I'm happy that our social work department is attracting more students, and many students are in the YouTube. I don't want to take your time and the speaker's time, the resource person time. I think the resource person should interact with us so that we can more and more enjoy their daily presence. We also try to involve them, by way of feedback, and we want them to give us more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Timothy, for introducing us to the speakers, to the international speakers, and also for speaking about Mahatma Gandhi's greatness, his books, and also about Be the Change, his concept of self-realization. He also spoke about the Indian civilization and resource and greatness, and we are so happy that as part of this mission, you have involved our department as part of this mission, and we look forward for many such initiatives and opportunities to work with you in the coming future. Thank you very much once again. I now request Dr. P.B. Shankar Narayan, Assistant Professor from the Department of Social Work, to formally welcome Professor Jayantan Govinder from the School of Social Sciences, University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa. On to you, Dr. Shankar.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity given. Respected Vice Chancellor, respected directors of Pondicherry University, Professor Balakrishnan and Professor Rajiv Jain, sir, respected Dean and respected HOD and the coordinator of the program, Dr. Shaheen, ma'am, and my other faculty members and faculty members from different colleges and universities, students, good evening, everybody. I deem it as a privilege as well as my pleasure to introduce the first speaker of the day, Dr. Professor Jayanathan Govinder. Professor Jayanathan Govinder is a senior lecturer in Industrial, Organizational and Labor Studies, School of Social Sciences in University of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. He has degrees from the University of Durban, Westville, West Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. His interests include civil society, interdisciplinary studies, BRICS sociology, sociological practices, and futures research. He has published in the areas of public management, participation, higher education, social policy, inequality, and social justice, and we can add more to his credentials. Due to paucity of the time restricting to this, I take this opportunity welcoming you, sir, for this international webinar on behalf of the Department of Social Work, our faculty members, students, and research scholars, and the supporting staff. I invite you for this webinar. Thank you.
On to you, Professor Jayantan. Now you can take over, sir. Professor Jayantan? Professor Jayantan?
Any connectivity problem or what?
Sir, he is joined. He's just confirmed he is joined. He's starting.
He has joined, ma'am. He has joined.
Unmute his mic. Unmute his mic, please.
He is unmuted also. He is unmuted also. He usually has to commence it. He has to commence his lecture.
Sir is speaking, but we cannot hear, ma'am.
Just to say that Professor Govender was having some problems with his sound. I don't see him on the chat, on the meeting list.
But his video is visible. Only I think there is some problem.
Oh.
I think he has to start communicating. Only then we'll be able to find out. Probably we are not able to hear him. He is speaking, but we are not able to hear him.
Then we can do one thing. We can ask David to go ahead. I will keep in touch with him personally. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I will call him and get to know what's the problem.
Okay.
Meanwhile, we can ask David sir to present. Is it right?
Shaheen ma'am. Shaheen ma'am.
Sir, please, sir, just hold on. He's getting connected. Please hold on.
Okay.
He says he'll get connected immediately. So I just request all of you to just hold for a second. Dr. David?
Yes.
Dr. David, can you please take over? Professor Jayantan has communicated that he has certain technical glitches. He'll get back to us in a short while.
Okay, can I start?
Yes, sir. Just hold on. I will ask my fellow colleague to introduce you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome, sir.
May I now request Dr. Iftikhar to please introduce Dr. David. On to you, Dr. Iftikhar.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving this opportunity. Honorable VC, Professor Gurneet Singh, respected Director, Dean, Pondicherry University, and our HOD, Department of Social Work, and Convener, Professor Shaheen Sultana, and a very good afternoon to all of you. I am immensely pleased to introduce our dignitary, Mr. David Dayalan Gengan. He is currently the chairperson of Peter Maritzburg Gandhi Memorial Committee in South Africa. He has completed a certificate in community higher education, service partnership from University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa in 2002, Master of Commerce in Leadership Studies and Local Economic Development from University of KwaZulu-Natal, Durban, South Africa in 2015. Under work experience and community involvement, he was educator from 1976 to 1999 at Arthur Blackcell School, He was a member of KwaZulu Natal Blind and Deaf Society from 1977, serving as a chairperson of the Pietermaritzburg region from 2009 to 2016. He worked as senior manager in economic development in the Zunduzi from 1999 and reached his superannuation in 2019. He was a councillor in Pietermaritzburg Zunduzi Transitional Local Council from 1995 to 1999 and served as the University Council member of the University of KwaZulu-Natal from 1996 to 1999 and also served as deputy chairperson of the Midland High School Sports Association from 1989 to 1995. He was a member of the school governing body of Arthur Blackstall School from 1999 to 2007 and from 2009 to 2011. He's a member, board member of Real Life Community Center from 2016 to date. He is currently the chairperson of Pietermaritzburg Gandhi Memorial Committee in South Africa. The Pietermaritzburg Gandhi Memorial Committee strives to promote the values, the ideology of Mahatma Gandhi, in particular, truth, peace, and non-violence, to take the message of peace, goodwill, and hope to young people in school, youth. Thank you.
On to Dr. David.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon to the Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University, Professor Gurneet Singh, special guests and speakers, and the faculty of the Department of Social Work at Pondicherry University, Professors Ranganathan, Sultana, and Krishnamurthy, and other faculty members of the university, students and participants. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Am I clear? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Madhu Prabharan, in a paper in 2011 titled Practice Intervention Towards a New Critical Social Work Practice, said that practice intervention is a form of participatory research working on the potential or the phonesis of its participants. If there is one person who walked this earth who showed that it was not enough to just espouse a theory, skill, or lesson, and that it must be enacted and realized, it has to be the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Professor Ranganathan mentioned this quote earlier in the introduction, "My life is my message," and I think that this encapsulates this completely. To put it simply, he practiced what he preached. He came to South Africa in 1893 as a young lawyer of 23 years and just an ordinary man trying to find his way in life. In his words, trying his luck. He admitted that he failed as a lawyer representing people in court and was actually writing depositions for his brother's law firm in Rajput when he got the offer of representing a Merman businessman in South Africa. This was Dada Abdullah from Durban, who actually was born in Gandhi's birth city, which was in Gujarat. Gandhi's life reflects how an ordinary person with weaknesses, and Gandhi had quite a few, can rise to great heights by shedding earlier prejudices and ethnocentric ideas through his adherence to love, truth, and nonviolence instead of hatred and greed. He never saw himself as a saint, being very much a man like a man, having the potential for good and ill. Professor Judith Brown, in a book, Gandhi in South Africa, said that Gandhi's image was one engaged on a pilgrimage, seeking after the truth and searching for a way to cope with the problems and dilemmas of life. He was able to conquer fear in his social activism, and in fact went to prison many times for his ideals, 5 times in South Africa, 9 times in colonialism. Truth was at the core of his being, espousing the dignity of labor and to protect the environment. It is rare to see a man stand up for his principles in the manner in which he did. Herman Cullenbach, a close associate of Gandhi in South Africa, reflected on how Gandhi responded to the discrimination not only of Indians but also Africans, which he encountered throughout his stay in South Africa. In those days, if you were a black man, you could not use tram cars, hotel lifts, and bathrooms, and other facilities used by whites. So Gandhi insisted that they walk to their destinations, sometimes for miles, and avoiding the use of certain facilities. He refused to eat in dining rooms that did not accommodate black people. He later traveled third class on public transport, wanting to experience the hardships of the laborers and black people firsthand. So traveling third class was something he started to do here in South Africa, which he continued, of course, to do when he went back to India. This is a far cry from the Barrow who came to South Africa in 1893, insisting on traveling first class, which was in line with his station in life, suffering the humiliation of being thrown train in Maritzburg when he refused to go to the third class compartment. Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, says of him, and I quote, "In 21 years of his stay in South Africa, we were to witness the birth of ideas and struggle that have exerted an incalculable influence on the history of the peoples of India and South Africa." Unquote. He said further that the tolerance, mutual respect, and unity for which Gandhi stood and acted had a profound influence on the liberation movement of the ANC and on his own thinking. Gandhi's ideas of peace, nonviolence, and satya attracted the Western world, with nonviolence being an effective tool to address and end conflict. Gandhi's experiments with truth in South Africa and his transformation was to lead to him being called the Mahatma. President Mandela said on his first visit to India in 1990 that he gave South Africa the lawyer Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. South Africa gave back to India the Mahatma. The incident at the Pietermaritzburg railway station on the 7th of June 1893 started what he called his active nonviolence and planted the seed for the formation of Satyagraha, which stands for truth force and which sometimes is loosely translated to be passive resistance. Gopalkrishna Gandhi, a grandson, former High Commissioner of India to South Africa, said the following of the incident in 1997 when the city of Pietermaritzburg honored Gandhi posthumously with the Freedom of the City Award. And I quote, this is a wonderful reflection on that incident. He said, when Gandhi was evicted from the train, an Indian visiting South Africa fell. But when Gandhi rose, an Indian South African rose. The Indian and the South African merged in him the instant he fell, doubtless with astonished disbelief. This must turn the very next incident to fury. But in an alchemy that was uniquely his own, it turned also into something totally different, something creative, something redemptive, something that changed shock into transformational resolve. Gandhi fell with a railway ticket no one on it. He rose with a testament none could ignore. He fell a passenger, but rose a patriot. He fell a barrister, but rose a revolutionary. His legal brief became a political cause. His sense of human decency transformed itself into a passion for human justice. The personal died within him at that moment and turned public. Mine became mine. In fact, Mohandas Gandhi was not flung here, he was launched, unquote. Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence was greatly influenced by the Quran, and in fact, he was given a copy of the Quran when he boarded the train in Durban on his way to Pretoria. The Bhagavad Gita also had a major influence on his thought, and of course, the Sermon on the Mount, found in the book of Matthew in the Bible, when Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you." Tolstoy and Ruskin were also instrumental in shaping his philosophy of Swadeshi and self-sufficiency, your own ground, tending to flock and live a common life. Reading Ruskin's book was a crucial type, bringing about spontaneous and practical transformation, and he was his life going to the idea expressed in the book. He translated the book into Gujarati, entitling it Sarvodaya, the welfare of all. He understood the teachings of the book to be: 1, the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. 2, all work was the same value, and all have the right of earning their living from their work. And 3, a life of labor is a life worth living. So Gandhi was able to adopt this simple life of a farmer and craftsman, devoting himself to the service of others. Along the way, he adopted brahmacharya, and renounced typical family life. The simple life brought him into contact with the indentured laborers, and he became aware of the sufferings of the depressed classes, drawing sympathy for the peasants and inculcating a love for village life, even wearing the dress of the laborers. Gandhi's work in the first few years in South Africa was confined to the business class who had brought him to South Africa, and he was criticized for not taking up the issues confronted by the indentured laborers. So gone were the frock coat and patent leather shoes of Ethiopia. In South Africa, the Phoenix settlement outside Durban was established in 1904 after Gandhi's reading of Ruskin's book, with the Tolstoy farm following in 1910 outside Johannesburg. These ashrams were small communities of men and women living a communal life of simplicity and self-reliance, where members did their own chores and were dedicated to, amongst other things, vows of truth, non-violence, simplicity of diet, and possession of only essentials. He said only the liberation of society can lead to that of the individual. So by the end of the first decade of the 20th century, Gandhi was already talking about and practicing self-reliance and self-sufficiency of communities. Ashrams in Ahmedabad and Sevagram followed when he returned to India. He believed that industrialization with its factory production just produced more wants, and he rather recommended small-scale cottage industries which produce goods for essential services. Gandhi's thought is a philosophy of self-transformation. He believed that the individual task is to make a sincere attempt to live according to the principles of truth and nonviolence. Its fundamental tenets are therefore moral. They include resisting injustice, developing a spirit of service, selflessness and sacrifice, emphasizing one's responsibilities rather than rights, self-discipline, simplicity of lifestyle, and attempting to maintain truthful and non-violent relations with others. By simplicity is meant voluntary simplicity, not poverty, which has no element of voluntarism in it. In fact, if there is one thing Gandhi never stood for, it was poverty. He said that the ultimate responsibility was to resist clear injustice, untruth, in conjunction with others or alone. Resistance should be non-violent if at all possible, but Gandhi did condone the use of violent means in certain circumstances in preference to submission, which he regarded as cowardice and equivalent to cooperation with evil. In relation to the use of violence, he stated categorically, and I quote, "Where there is only a choice between cowardice and violence, I would advise violence," unquote. In 1906, he had already realized that writing depositions and submitting petitions to the authority were having no effect, and that the key to Swaraj was in mass mobilization through civil disobedience. What the late great civil rights leader John Lewis, who just passed away last month, called good trouble. And so Satyagraha Truth Force was born in Johannesburg on the 11th of September 1906 at a public meeting in the Empire Theatre in Johannesburg in protest of the need for registration of all Indians and the need to carry the pass at all times. It was a translation of thought and speech into the ethics of action. The packed hall unanimously agreed to oppose the legislation, declaring with God as their witness that they will not submit to such a law, and that they were prepared to go to jail and be insulted, prepared to go hungry, to be flogged by the warders, and to face a fine or attachment of their properties. Gandhi indicated that there were many differences between passive resistance and Satyagraha, even to the extent that passive resistance had a scope for the use of arms, and often was a preparation for the use of arms and the harassing of the other party. There was nothing passive about Satyagraha. He said that Satyagraha and brute force can never go together, and there is no possibility of injuring an opponent. The opponent is rather conquered by sufferings in one's own person. Gandhi said, real suffering bravely borne melts even a heart of stone. Such is the potency of suffering, and therein lies the key to satyagraha. He believed that non-violence comes out of a particular lifestyle created by the social and personal context in which people learn a basic attitude of non-violence, which becomes an integral part of their lives. For Gandhi, non-violence was embedded in a theological vision of reality and of man. It was a religious commitment, a matter of faith, and not a freestanding option which could be taken up or put down at will. Satyagraha meant holding fast to truth and was for the morally strong, not for the weak. Hence the change in his lifestyle when he turned his back on personal accumulation of wealth, living a simpler life of what he needed, having a very limited vegetarian diet. He said that people had to free themselves from fear to follow the path of non-violence. It was the understanding of life appropriate to the cultivation of non-violence that led to him to the construction of self-contained communities on the lines of ashrams, which would produce a new society and polity, and when necessary, provide exponents of satyagraha. The final satyagraha was in November 1913 in South Africa, 6 months before he left for good, when over 2,000 men, women, and children marched across the Natal border into the Transvaal without permits. These were required at the time for any Indian moving between the provinces, and was part of the government's plan to restrict the movement and settlement of Indians outside of Natal. They openly courted arrest to protest against the oppressive laws against Indians, which included the Immigration Act, the £3 tax which every Indian over the age of 16 had to pay to remain in the country, and to call for recognition of Indian marriages. This satyagraha was the first to include women. In all the other protest actions, women stayed at home, taking care of the family while the men went to jail. What precipitated the inclusion of women was a ruling by a judge in the Cape, Judge Cameron Searle, who ruled that only marriages conducted under the Christian faith would be legal. So Kasturba went to Gandhi and said that the women would like to participate to bring attention to the fact that thousands of marriages were now annulled. He refused at first until she remarked that actually, according to the judge, she was not his wife. So 16 women, 12 from the Transvaal and 4 from the Phoenix settlement in Durban, including Kasturba Gandhi, joined the men in Charlestown on the Natal border, crossing over on the 6th of November 1913 to the small Transvaal town of Volksrust. Gandhi was arrested 3 times during the course of this march and was eventually sentenced to 3 months of hard labor. All 16 of the women that participated were also eventually arrested and sentenced to 3 months in prison, with one young woman, Veliama Mudlia, a 16-year-old, becoming a mother, succumbing to tuberculosis, which she contracted in prison 2 months after being released. The government eventually agreed to a joint commission, including Gandhi and other Indian leaders, to address the issues raised in the protest action, which resulted in the Indian Relief Bill, which was passed in Parliament in early 1914, which scrapped the £3 tax, the Black Act, the Transvaal Immigration Act, and the recognition of Hindu, Muslim, and Parsi marriages. Gandhi's work in South Africa was done. Gandhi came to us in South Africa as a shy young barrister. Ramachandra Guha, the Indian author, said he was an unlikely candidate for the compelling episode of self-definition, from which he emerged a confident public figure and an accomplished political and social organizer by the time he left South Africa in 1914. It was here that he came to acquire his 4 major callings, those of freedom fighter, social reformer, religious pluralist, and prophet. The 7th of June, 1893, is when his social activism took root. What I said earlier, he called his active nonviolence. It was the night that changed the world. His philosophy of satyagraha influenced the course of history in South Africa, India, and in the United States. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I quote, "Love for Gandhi was a potent instrument for social and collective transformation. It was in this Gandhian influence on love and nonviolence
that I discovered the method for social reform that I had been seeking, unquote. After the incident in Pietermaritzburg on the 7th of June, Gandhi was to stay another 2 years, during which time he established the Natal Indian Congress, the first black political formation in South Africa. He left for for India in 1896 to bring his wife and sons to South Africa, and they stayed, of course, for 2 decades until 1914. In between his work as a lawyer and activist passive resistor in Natal and the Transvaal, taking up the various protest actions against discriminatory laws and regulations, he experimented with truth. His philosophy and thought can be summarized in the following 4 words: truth, nonviolence, Sarvodaya, and Satyagraha. These constitute Gandhi's thought and teaching and the 4 pillars of his philosophy. Gandhi initially had narrow views of caste, gender, and race. In fact, he made some very derogatory statements about Africans when he first arrived, for which he was roundly criticized, being labeled a racist. But he outgrew these tendencies by self-correcting, having the ability to grow and evolve as his career progressed, a key tenet of his philosophy. More than 7 decades after his death, his legacy and life are still discussed and acted upon in countries that barely knew him, and he continues to loom large in the land of his birth. His ideas are praised as well as attacked, dismissed by some as dangerous or irrelevant, yet celebrated by others as key to resolving religious tensions, tensions between low and high castes, and tensions between human and the environment, tensions between big cities and rural communities. Einstein said this of him, and I quote, "Generations to come, it may well be, will scarcely believe that such a man as this one ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth," unquote. Many people today believe that Gandhi still has relevance for society. Ramachandra Guha said the following of why Gandhi still matters today. He said that injustice is still rife in the world at large, and a mass effort of civil disobedience through non-violent means can still be used to oppose it. Gandhi was a patriot, but not a nationalist, never glorifying religion. In fact, Gandhi refused to define citizenship by religion. All had equal rights. In fact, Gandhi went to a temple on his return to India as an adult only in 1930, when the temple in Madurai admitted untouchables. He was not narrow-minded about language, promoting linguistic pluralism. He developed a love for other languages, which started with his interaction with the Tamil-speaking indentured laborers in South Africa. As a matter of interest, of the 154,000 indentured laborers that came to South Africa between 1860 and 1911, 60% of them were Tamil-speaking people that came from Tamil Nadu, and some Telugu-speaking that came from Andhra Pradesh. So he had to learn the language of these people in order to represent them adequately in the various trials and court action that they took at the time. Gandhi made leaders out of followers, being able to identify talent, nurture it, and set it free. He was not threatened by those who disliked and opposed him. And lastly, Gandhi's political life was transparent. Everything that he stood for was put into writing. As was mentioned earlier, Gandhi did everything by the force of example, accepting untouchables by admitting them to his ashrams, courting arrest throughout his life for the cause of eradicating injustice, going on a series of fasts in bringing attention to the causes he stood for, and living out his ideas. His life was truly his message. When we look at COVID-19 and what it has done to the economies around the world and the changes it has brought to the dynamics of various countries, renewed interest in Gandhian philosophy has been instilled. Professor Krishnamurthy, who spoke earlier, mentioned the following few thoughts post the international webinar, which was hosted by PMC a couple of months ago. He said that consideration should be given to building Gandhian global movements standing for non-racism. Human rights need to be reinvented and explored. Investment on arms and ammunition should be divested in favor of sustainable education. Devising a unified strategy of non-violence through the philosophy of Gandhi, Mandela, and King, and rejuvenating Gandhian approaches to the context of self-realization, self-help and reform, sustainable development, and Sarvodhya. I think these things should be given some consideration as we go forward, trying to imagine a new society. The webinar last week, which was hosted by Rajiv Gandhi University, explored the Gandhian philosophy of Swadeshi for the rejuvenation of the economies of the villages and rural India and the promotion of self-reliance. Labor-intensive production and development is key to economic revival. Gandhi said that the rich must live simply so that the poor can simply live. Decentralization is critical to self-reliance and politics. The economy and education must be promoted in the rural areas. Someone said that Gandhian philosophy can be a useful vaccine for the new world post-COVID-19 in removing racism, unemployment and poverty, inequality and corruption. Arundhati Roy, the Indian author and commentator, someone who sometimes can be very controversial, has this to say recently about the way forward post-COVID-19. And I'd like to quote this. It was included in the periodicals in India a couple of weeks ago. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing for a return to normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we have built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our databanks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it, unquote. If you want a new post-COVID-19 world where the dignity of life is respected, where we live in peace and love, then we have to do what Gandhi said. And I quote, "We must be the change that we want to see in the world." It's a famous quotation of Gandhi. But I think it has much relevance today when we look forward to a post-COVID-19 world. We all have a responsibility towards achieving Sarvodhya, and we must not lose faith in humanity. Gandhi said humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. We need to find our humanity. In conclusion, I think Gandhi has taught us the need to translate our thought and speech into the ethics of action. Our spirituality must find resonance in our actions, the way we do our jobs, the way we relate to others, and the way we treat the environment that we live in. Gandhi said that without action, we will go nowhere. When what we think, what we say, and what we do are in harmony, we can achieve Sarvodhya, the abode of peace and love, a society based on fraternity, truth, and self-sacrifice, and non-violence. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. David. I remember we were trying to reach you in the last couple of days, but every time we write a mail, we get it either midnight or so. So now we understand why when we asked whether you would like to present a PPT, you prefer to speak. It was a wonderful extempore, and we really enjoyed listening to what you said, sir. I will just throw light on what were the major contents of his talk. He spoke about Gandhiji's simplicity, about his initiative, and how Gandhiji did not stand for poverty. He also spoke about his ideas to Swaraj and how passive resistance was his strength. Sir also focused on how understanding of life was Gandhiji's primitive thought and how his thoughts were able when it related to non-violence and satyagraha. Mr. David also touched upon how Gandhiji evolved, rather grew over the years, and his ideas of gender, caste, human and environment, which were narrowed, broadened, expanded, and it accommodated as many ideas and suggestions came across in his life. He also believed that all of them had equal rights and he was a front runner in promoting linguistic pluralism. And his thoughts, his ideas, and his principles stood even in the times of COVID-19. And how he believes that a new society is to be evolved, and how all his ordeals and his thoughts and his actions in his entire life will add towards creating a new society. Thank you very much, sir. It was wonderful listening to you, and I'm happy that you did an extempore than a PPT so that we could hear with that emotional feel how much you must have read over the years and contributing to the audience here. Thank you. Professor Jensen is ready to come on live. We will see whether we could have him. He is having some technical glitches at his end, but let's try. On to you, Professor Jensen. Professor Jensen? Professor Murthy? Professor Murthy? Professor Murthy?
Yes, madam.
Sir, I think he's still having some problems. So probably you can just throw light on what Mr. David spoke about for a minute, and then in the meantime, we'll just see whether he's able to join again.
Should we go for discussion now on David's presentation?
Sir, we can go ahead with his presentation.
Yes, come. Yeah, please come.
Okay, sir.
Jayanathan, welcome. Hello, Professor. Yes. Okay, something wrong.
I think he has some problem with the system. Our team has able to reach him, but still he's not able to rectify it, sir. However, he shared his PPT with us. So if he permits and you agree, then we go ahead and presenting his PPT for a minute, and then we take up questions based on Mr. David's presentation, sir.
Probably
very good. Go ahead.
We can ask him to log out and log in, ma'am.
He's tried that 2 times, sir. He's tried that 2 times.
Yeah, the sound.
Yeah. Professor Murthy, I think you can just initiate the discussions among the participants. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Professor Murthy? Professor Murthy, Professor Jandal is trying to reach, but he's unable to connect. Can you initiate the discussions? Can you open the forum?
We can initiate it.
Yeah,
you can initiate the discussion now.
yes, sir.
You can initiate.
Okay, I request the participants to type the questions, your comments, your suggestions in the chat box so that it will be facilitated by Professor Murthy. Sir, there is a question as to how this Gandhi's ideology can be practiced in day-to-day life. There are also questions on the YouTube channel.
What's the question?
Madam, please type your question.
Okay.
There is a question. I think Professor Jain's audio is leaking. Yeah. Mr. David?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sir. So there's a question in the chat box because we are also having a parallel YouTube relay. So they are asking, how can Gandhiji's ideology be practiced in day-to-day life? Also, you spoke about the night of 7th June 1893. So can you throw light in specific how this evolved later?
Okay, let me take the first one first. I think that Gandhi's one of his favorite and I think most spoken about quotations was, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So in terms of your everyday life, if you want to have changes in your circle, you've got to be the example. And I think that whatever I spoke about in the talk today pointed to some of the things that one needs to have, and that everybody has to have a certain amount of spirituality in them, because these things like non-violence and so on cannot be practiced if you don't have that thing as a core value in your life. I think it was Rabindranath Tagore who said that what is the point of kneeling down at the altar with your sacrifice, praying to God, when you can't bend your knee and help your fellow man who's in need? And I think that that's what Gandhi was actually saying throughout his life, that in order for us to bring about a change, we have got to take the initiative and do that. I always tell my children that it's pointless. What's the point in saying to God, provide for those who do not have, when we ourselves don't make the effort in order to do that? So there has to be action. We can't be talking about these things all the time. We're not going to change the world, but we can change the circle in which we find ourselves, our friends, our community, by the manner in which we live our lives. And I think that there's enough in Gandhian philosophy and his life that we can learn in how to be a better citizen in our community. In terms of the 7th of June, one must understand that when Gandhi arrived here, he was this barrister that was educated in London. He was, as somebody mentioned, I think the Vice Chancellor mentioned earlier, that he was from a royal family. And so he never traveled third class on a train. He was always respected in terms of his profession. And when he was thrown off on that, it was at 9 o'clock at night in the middle of our winter in South Africa. It was bitterly cold. And he was a foreigner who was here just for a week or so. And he had this humiliation of being thrown off the first class compartment in a foreign city. He was in Durban before, for a week or so before he traveled to Pretoria. And he said that when he went into the waiting room, by the way, this waiting room is still there. The station is still there in Pietermaritzburg. And we have a monument, in fact, a plinth on the platform of the station where he was actually thrown off the train. And just as a matter of interest, that plinth was unveiled by the Indian cricket team. In fact, Saurav Ganguly, the Indian captain, unveiled that plinth in 2003 when the Indian cricket team were here in South Africa. So when he went into this waiting room, he pondered what he should be doing. He said, should I go back to India, or should I go on my way to Pretoria and not mind the insult, or should I do something about it? And so that was what was going through his mind. And he stayed. He said that he was going to stay and fight this cause. And I think that if he didn't mind the insult, I don't think that Satyagraha would have been born when it actually did in 1906. I don't think that the liberation of movement in India would have progressed the way it did if Gandhi just went on his way and did not become the social activist. So it had a profound influence on his life. And the issue of injustice was there. You know, while Satyagraha was formed only in 1906, the seed was actually planted in Pietermaritzburg on that platform on the 9th of the 7th of June. So it's a very significant date and event that actually transformed his life.
So thank you. There is another question coming up. How Gandhiji's ideology can be used for the development of the nation or other nation upliftment?
Yes, I think, can I answer?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think if we look at what has happened through this pandemic throughout the world, not just in India but throughout the world, here in South Africa also, the people that were impacted the most were the poor and the normally marginalized communities. And this is in the villages, in our case in South Africa, in the townships where mainly Black people live, that are poor, unemployed, where there's gross inequalities. And I think those are the people that were marginalized the most. So I think looking ahead, Gandhian philosophy of self-sufficiency is a critical tool that can be used to uplift those communities going forward. We need to educate people. We need to make sure that they are skilled in order to meet the challenges of this new society. You know, Gandhi's philosophy in terms of education was, many people were saying that perhaps he was a bit unrealistic. But his philosophy of education was that we need to educate people based on the utility value of what we are giving them. Because people today, even in India, I think, we've got graduates who are unemployed because whatever they studied is not relevant to the needs on the ground. So Gandhi's view of education was that we should be skilling people in the professions and in what they need to do in their communities. You know, what we call vocational training. But unfortunately, what has happened is that vocational training has been given to people who we think are not academically able to go on to university and to get degrees and all that kind of stuff. So I think that in terms of his ideology, self-sufficiency, education and training for the needs on the ground in the communities. And I mean, you know, Swadeshi, you know, the made in India by Indians. I think it's critical going forward. Here in South Africa, I might just add that we've been bedeviled with this buying and importing of goods made also in India, but in China, in Indonesia, and South Korea. That is what has happened. And so we actually export our raw materials like leather and gold and so on to your countries, and we buy back the finished product. Whereas we can be productive making those things here in South Africa, creating employment for the vast masses of our people. I think that Gandhian ideology is critical to erasing not just poverty and unemployment, but inequalities that we've seen through this pandemic that has swept the world. Thank you.
So there is another question. How in the rural Sarvodaya approach India can be self-reliant. Rather, how can we use Gandhiji's approach to make India self-reliant?
Well, I think it follows from this ideology question that I've just answered. I think that we've got to go back to when he came back from South Africa to India. He learned that in order to make communities sustainable, that they had to start producing themselves. And so, for example, in his ashram that he created in Phoenix, each of the members of that ashram were given a piece of land, and each one had to produce whatever they needed from that piece of land. So when he came back to India, he propagated this whole issue of small scale industries in communities, like the cottage industries and so on. The whole issue of khadi, for example, spinning cloth, stemmed out of that. You know, that communities need to look to themselves and not from outside in order to make themselves sustainable. And so I think Gandhi, one has to read through the whole philosophy of Swadeshi in order to get practical and detailed instruction as to how to become self-sustainable and self-sufficient in our communities.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a question which I really want to have an answer from you. Sir, in the given scenario where there's crisis all across the world, we witness that many youth, they just try to end their lives. But here we heard from you a Gandhi who was young, who believed in a revolution, who actually developed and grew over the years, and then he understood what was right, what was wrong, and he evolved as an individual. So what do you think from Gandhiji's works and words and his philosophy could be a message for the youth of today?
Yeah, I think just to start off this answer, I think that the time for youth has arrived. You know, to say that the youth are the future members of our society is wonderful, but the time for the youth is now. And there are enough issues that the youth need to apply themselves to. I mean, if you look at around the world, injustice, racism is rife. I mean, even in India, the issue of interreligious strife, we've seen it through the decades. And it's happening in the villages and in the towns and cities of India. These are issues that need to be tackled by the young people. And so I think that, if you look at Gandhi, when he came here, as I said, he was 23, right? He was from an upper class. I mean, he was from Gujarati, right? He was from the royal family. And so he had his prejudices in terms of caste. He had his prejudices in terms of race, because he said some things here that were not really kosher, in fact. In fact, now they would be regarded as being racist. And he's been criticized the world over. Some of his statues have been taken down because of some of the statements that he made early in his life. But if you look at the transformation that happened in his life, he very early learned that you have got to have the conviction within yourself in order to bring about a change. And so he, in simplistic terms, I mean, he divested himself of this high-flouted profession that he had in terms of law, in the way he dressed. He became a simple person identifying with the people. So I think we need to identify with the masses on the ground, and young people have a huge responsibility in taking these views and these values forward. We need to create a means for young people to interact with each other and learn from what is happening in different parts of the world. Just as a matter of interest, we have a global initiative. I think Professor Krishnamurti was saying that we need to create a global movement for nonviolence and for peace, standing up against racism and injustice. And there is a global network called the Gandhi King Global Initiative. There is a chapter in India that was convened by Mr. Prasad Golyanpally from I think it's Ahmedabad, but anyway, so I think that young people, when they look at Gandhi, they mustn't look at Gandhi in terms of this older statement that he became. It took a lifetime in order for that. In fact, in his experiments with truth, he said that he apologized for the fact that some of the statements that he made, some of his teachings that he postulated earlier in his life, that he had to change that as we were going forward. So there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. I think young people need to know that transformation happens over a period of time and doesn't happen automatically by the education that you get. And in fact, education is supposed to be the experience of life. You know, people confuse schooling with education. Having all of these degrees that young people are going to get through their studies does not make you educated. It's just part of the process towards education. Education is the experience of life. And I think that Gandhi, if anything he taught us, is about his life that mattered. It was his life that mattered, not what he was saying. It was the action on the ground that he wanted us to reflect on. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are another couple of questions.
I hope that Professor Governor comes quickly. The questions are coming quick and fast.
No, just two more questions for you, and then we will take it up. The first one which appeared was, is there any relation between Gandhianism and Marxism? If so, what is it? And the second one, what do you feel is Bapu's philosophy of social change, and what did Bapu actually think about it?
Yes, let me take that social change thing first. I think that because of his narrow views that he had when he first arrived in South Africa, it created certain restrictions in the terms of his interaction with people. And I think that in terms of social change, we've got to see how, when he came back to India, how he was able to bring about or to actually speak about social change, much to the chagrins of people in his community. For example, he was ostracized by his family simply because of his attitude towards the untouchables. And he insisted that the whole issue of untouchability, for example, has to be something that came from within a person, not from a law. You know, and that is why he had this fallout with Ambedkar, who wanted to accept the law outlawing untouchability, whereas Gandhi was saying it must come from our beliefs in our Hindu philosophy and our Hindu religion. We must be able to have that within ourselves. So Gandhi's idea of social change came from within. He said it had to have a spiritual base. That's why I said earlier that non-violence is not easy if you don't have a spiritual base for it. And so his social change had to do with coming from within, of who the person that he was, and his example that he set to everybody. In terms of Marxism, I think he was influenced by Marx in terms of his writings, and so if you look at the social change that he was bringing about, he was saying that basically everybody has the means of production. Okay, everybody had the means of production, and therefore everybody had to be equal in terms of what they got out of giving their labor, for example. I think that was a critical thing he learned from Marx. And of course, you know, it's a social agenda that he had also. But Marxism, I think that is what it taught him, that people were equal on the ground in terms of this factor of production that they had, the labor that they had to offer. And that is why he said that the labor and the actual remuneration for a lawyer must be the same as somebody tilling the ground. You know, that there shouldn't be a major difference in terms of the labor that is given, and that there should be, you know, an acceptance that there is honesty in the way you're actually give your labor in terms of the production. I think let me give Professor Govender a chance now to say something.
Sir, sorry, Professor Jayantan is not able to get connected.
Is he not? Oh, okay.
Not able to connect. Sir, thank you very much. Just one last question, which we thought would be really good if you could give us some thought on that. And that is, how could universities be instruments of social change given the Gandhian philosophy? Because all universities today are working towards this. We are having the 150th celebrations. So if you could throw light on that, it would be really good. Thank you.
Yes, let me just say that I think one of the things that can be leveled against higher education institutions and universities in particular is that the learning is not all the time relevant to the needs of communities and cities and countries. We get a host of dissertations and research documents that are sitting on shelves in university libraries, many of which are not reflective of what is needed by the community. And I think if anything that universities can do is that they need, as part of the academic program over 3 years or 4 years or whatever the degree, however long it takes, is to have a component of the learning in the community. By sending students into the community for a period of time, universities can decide how it should happen. One of the universities that actually does this is the University of Portland, Oregon, where they call it a capstone program. Nobody can graduate after 3 years or 4 years of study without doing a capstone. And a capstone is a social issue that is confronted by the community. And it's listed at the beginning of every year. And students, I think they have 14 students per capstone, a diversified range of students, mathematicians, teachers, scientists, environmentalists, and so on, all come together to address the issue of the community. And I think that will be a start, in my opinion, of making the universities responsive to the social issues confronted by communities. So I would advocate something like that, where every student, before he or she leaves the university, has some interaction with communities to get at least first-hand knowledge of what the community is facing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David, for being extremely accommodating.
Speak something, sir.
Thank you so much. We will just going to listen to Professor Jayantan. If he connects, we move ahead.
Hello, good afternoon.
However, he has asked us to start sharing his slides. So I request Father Remy to please share his slides.
Sir, you can start, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. I apologize for the bad conditions on my side. I'm hoping that I am audible. If you can please confirm.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. If you are able to put on the slides, I will speak to my slides so that the students, will be able to follow me. So I will begin that I am audible. I want to first thank you sincerely for inviting me to this wonderful webinar. Special thanks to Professor Sultana and Professor Murthy, as well as the other distinguished professors at Pondicherry University. I also bring greetings from Ila Gandhi, who is unable to join us at this webinar because of other work commitments. So she asked me to convey her greetings and indicated that Dennis would be representing her very effectively. So, Professor Sultana, I thought I would just say that I had done some lectures at Mumbai University on voluntary social work in South Africa, because social work actually began, through Gandhi's efforts vis-a-vis the Natal Indian Congress. And if your students are interested at some time, I could repeat the lectures for your students. So I will begin. If you could go to the first slide. I want to sort of speak to the context. The context indicates multiple crises. And we can begin with the environment, followed by energy, of course, nuclear proliferation that's repeating itself. The 2008 financial crisis, which resulted in add-on effects to millions of people across the world, particularly Europe and the US. And we also have a situation with our global alignments. And this is in respect of countries who are cooperating with each another for different reasons. They obviously have particular interests which they are safeguarding, and in the effort to support each other, you will see that firstly in the EU, there's been some shifts in the dynamics there, followed by BRICS, which is a global response to the realignment of global power, which at the moment favors the countries of the Atlantic Ocean. And then we have smaller countries who are realigning themselves, and they are known as the CIVETS countries, and finally followed by the next 11. And the final crisis, of course, is COVID-19. Now, as part of this context, I wanted to sort of crystallize the key research areas which are being undertaken globally to give the students an idea of what are those critical issues that are being researched, and whole bodies of knowledge, new knowledge, are being developed according to these meta themes. And these include bioeconomy and biotechnology, space research, smart energy, and for the students, you will know that the economy is always driven by the nature, of the energy sources that's actually produced. So our future and our future development rests on very smart energy. Then we have the research area of the environment, which includes climate change and, of course, sustainability. The second last item has to do with us, human beings, around our human health and our social dynamics. But they're also focusing on brain research. They want to understand, how our brain, which is associated with mind, how they relate and how they function, and the belief that with that understanding, we can improve, our thinking, our actions, and our inputs into knowledge creation. And then finally, the obvious area of the digital society. So the third, sort of dynamic for me has why humankind is focusing on space exploration at this time. Of course, it goes back into the 1950s and the 1960s. But in the present, our first issue has to do intolerably, I think, with existential fulfillment. Human beings are constantly trying to unravel the mystery of the meaning of life. The second is our scientific curiosity around new technologies and research. And space exploration provides us with this opportunity for new technologies. The third obviously has to do with overcoming the sort of challenges that the Earth faces as a result of what we as human beings fix on the planet. And the fourth is the possibility of colonization of human beings being located in space. And that's hard to imagine right now. But clearly, in the understanding of the scientists, they strongly believe the colonization is possible. I think the most sinister reason around space mining for me, and I look to say sinister because one of the typical sort of objectives is, to derive wealth from space. Students will be interested in knowing that when the Big Bang happened, all of space was filled up with a lot of gold. So they probably tried to retrieve that gold. So if you move to the next slide, I bring the three dynamics together: global issues, scientific concerns, and space exploration. And I pose the question of the possibility of these three dynamics contributing to universal values. And the reason I use the universal values is because some people feel, they say that universal values are, is simply impossible. We have various value systems, and of course they are correct. Now, what I want to introduce in my talk is those values, which are Gandhian in nature, and I'm not sure that it's examples are very obvious. COVID-19, Ebola, and the health crisis, poverty, and so on.
Sir, I am cutting this one and I am once more adding. The sound is not clear. Once more, I am calling you.
Yeah, sound. Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. So I was on the slide, which is headed "Why Universal Values." So I was developing that point. Firstly, that human problems defy solutions in their own context. So we therefore require
Connectivity.
Hello, I hope you can hear me now.
Yeah, continue, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'm on the slide, which is headed "Why Universal Values." So the point I was making is that our human problems cannot be solved, within the context where they are created. So we need to cooperate with others, other countries, other scientists, other universities, and so on to resolve our issues. But the third issue is very crucial. That human problems are symptoms of the evolution of global society. This is key because the world is constantly changing, and not only is it producing so-called positive, outcomes, it's also creating negative outcomes. And the obvious examples would be issues like sustainability, the depletion, of certain energy sources like coal, oil, and so on. So the fourth is that we actually require a coordinated global response or action to drive peace, security, and financial stability. I'm going to proceed then. Hope that the sound is still intact. For the students, I just simply want to, do a very quick definition of what is a value. Basically, for the students, a value is discipline internalized as self-discipline. Now, Gandhi was very, very good at this, at being able to create a link between, his conceptualization of discipline and how he internalizes it. Which then determines his action. He has a saying, what you think eventually, would lead to a certain character and so on. The second is, is to promote, some universal conduct amongst people, where we behave according to rules that are accepted by all people. We're not saying that, look, we want a global police state, but we're saying that within reason, that people should accommodate their action and be disciplined with that. And finally, the idealized goal of perfection, which again, the students might want to be critical of this, that all of this is, simply idealism, it's a hope. And that to materialize, these values are in fact very, very difficult. Of course, the students will be right, but we need to find ways of at least getting very close, to this idea of so-called perfection. So very quickly now to move to the purpose of values, because now we are drawing on the link, right, of these universal values to Gandhi's 5, critical sort of values. So the first is to change and develop the human being, the individual. The second is to achieve a universal worldview. The third is to structure personal principles. So it's the individual. This is where we actually begin. The fourth is to promote critical thought. Gandhi was very, very particular about this. He was very discriminatory. When I use the word discriminatory, I use it in a positive sense. So I'm not talking about discrimination against a certain group of people. I'm speaking about how his thought processes was able to be very discriminative, right? And that means being able to isolate very clear thoughts, and from those clear thoughts, conduct his action. And finally, the development of personality, identity, and the idea of becoming a global citizen. So, yes, Gandhi's treasure, and I deliberately use the word treasure because it is a very simple word, and we all know that the meaning of the word treasure, is some kind of material value that you cannot, really determine. So it's an approximation. Sometimes we even say its value is so high, that it is now it cannot, you cannot put a number to it. You cannot put some kind of descriptive, sort of meaning to the word treasure. And they're very simple, just 5. Others might disagree, and they say that the other values, they might be right. They might identify peace, but I included peace, in these other values. So, firstly, the love of humanity, justice, non-violence, tolerance, and freedom. Now, that coming together as a culture of coexistence. So, the way I think about Gandhi's treasure of values is then coalescing, finding this kind of cooperative, kind of space, if you like, in the imagination, and then that leading to a culture of coexistence. And that was, for Gandhi, really crucial. I'm coming to the last slide, so I apologize if I'm taking much time. I will just take another 3 minutes. Why I call this possibilities is I think that these can actually become global programs, right? Whether they are distributed spatially or geographically, I'm not very clear, but I think they can become programs in different ways. The first is to develop a new vision of a global economy. And we all know that capitalism has created this global crisis, and it's never contributed to the upliftment of those who are poor. In fact, it's created more and more poverty, and deeper poverty as well. The second is for us to reimagine global governance. I'm not necessarily referring to the United Nations system, but I'm referring to maybe that in addition to other ideas, or in whatever way we can configure this notion of global governance. The third, which is very familiar in the subcontinent, and that is unity in diversity. It is a term that we in South Africa use often. In our institutions, in our relations with others in the community, and so on. So we basically treasure this notion that was actually that originated in the subcontinent, India in particular. The fourth is, Gandhi was very, very particular about independent thought and independent action, as well as critical thought. So that makes us better human beings, and I think that's what that value does. The systems of conflict resolution, yes, we would not be able to, live without conflict. Conflict seems to be built into the human condition. So long as we think differently from each another, that will produce, a recurring, ongoing conflict. So we need to put together new systems of resolving our conflicts. Then the respect for nature and the cosmos. I spoke about, space exploration. So we need to develop a set of regulations around, how we treat space as well, not just, the nature, our cosmology, which is local to us. And then the whole idea of universal human development, that the set of very, very simplistic, so-called simplistic values can actually lead to universal human development. Gandhi had particular technologies of thinking, and we can speak about it, when we have time, of how we can actually develop universal human development. And finally, we must be able to engage with science, scientific method, and include in that, a reflection on metaphysics, as well as our own spirituality. Thank you very much, colleagues. I hope the presentation was audible and you were able to listen through my talk. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Professor. We just request you to stay online for a couple of questions. Can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. So we are very happy that you spoke on the purpose of values. What is a value? Gandhi's treasure of values. Also, you touched upon humanity, justice, non-violence, tolerance, freedom. You also spoke about the culture of coexistence and the conflict resolution and how, people living together are bound to have it, and how resolution will really capacitate their human development. You finally ended up with a universal human development, which is very important if the entire nations and the globe together has to work progressively towards self-development and peer development. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, there are a couple of questions for you. Can I go ahead? Sir?
Thank you, Professor.
Yes. Sir, how can we capacitate our youth with conflict resolution strategies, as they seem to really struggle with this? Can I repeat my question, sir?
Yes, it is a very good question. So we need to develop what I refer to as the technologies, or you might want to use the word mechanisms of conflict resolution. Africa is well, all across the world. There are sort of conflicts occurring all the time. But the conflict resolution strategies in Africa to address both political conflicts and the different physical wars that are occurring. By the way, there are altogether a total of 84 conflicts taking place in Africa as we actually speak. So we use certain cultural values in the African context, which are common, across the to the different people and the different cultures who are in conflict with each another. So we look for common ground at a cultural level, which both sides are able to recognize as well as appreciate and be willing, to respect those cultural values, and also to be able to align their conduct according to these cultural values. There's also the tendency to bring in the older people, to involve older people, as well as significant leaders, whom people generally tend to respect. It is a system where the older people, are able to communicate to younger people in very interesting ways, which draws them into a common conversation. So that issue around, the generation being in and bringing in, a kind of respectful for engagement. But I think the most important sort of intervention must be from both sides, or from any number of sides who are in conflict with each another, is that an initial approach must consist of a set of agreements, right? A set of rules that is common to all. So if we begin there, you will see that we avoid the recurrence of some kind of conflicting idea or some kind of response which may not be appropriate. In South Africa, we have, I think, about 5 or 6 that I know of, conflict resolution institutions. Some of them are international NGOs, some of them are part of university institutions. So the point I'm making is that the area of conflict resolution is an academic area of study. And it's not new to India either. Several Indian institutions offer, in the political science studies and politics, the sub-discipline of conflict resolution. So I think we can actually promote amongst our students the notion, of them becoming practitioners in conflict resolution, and they can become, experts at this, not only, becoming practitioners, but also to teach it and to write it and so on. I hope that that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So there's another question. They ask, how can Gandhi's philosophical interventions be applied to address gender inequities?
Thank you very much. That's also a very important question. The relationship between Gandhi and Kasturba is a fascinating one. You know, and Professor Murthy will recall one of the presenters from the subcontinent who attended last year's the Gandhi Memorial Conference spoke about Kasturba, her life and her personality and her conduct and her strictness and so on. So if you begin with that relationship, there's a lot to learn from there. And you find some of the lessons in Gandhi's autobiography, right? So look at his writings, and you'll find that he writes about, you know, very simple matters, day-to-day sort of, you know, issues, but they tell us, you know, wonderful sort of meaning. So they have bigger meaning, you know, a larger kind of response to the human issues that we're actually struggling with. So the question of gender relations, you know, to speak about it in very simplistic terms, you know, that it's equal and that we need to have an approach that treats both genders equal. Well, of course, it's 3 genders now, by the way. India is amongst one of the few in the world that has recognized third gender. So we also need to include the third gender in this sort of conversation. So what I'm saying is that to think of you know, gender relations as being equal is for me difficult to resolve in my own mind, because they appear to be prejudices at different levels. You know, some of them are in the material existence; they're there as, you know, rules and conventions and actions, and some of them are very, very subtle. You know, they are internal to people, and some of them are hidden, you know, within our cultural practices. So when we speak about gender relations, I think our point of departure should be to look at the context within which we want to examine gender relations. So for the purposes of, you know, students who are interested, I would recommend that they are able to provide a very detailed descriptive analysis of the context in which they want to examine the question of gender relations. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. One last question, sir. Do you agree that the world over is facing a deficit in terms of human values? If so, what is your suggestion?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It is also a very integral question to constantly pose and remind ourselves, you know, of firstly, you know, the erosion of you know, of the different value systems that are present. Now, I think if you're thinking through a student lens, you know, we will have to identify the range of value systems that are available to us human beings. You know, you might want to begin with, say, the Nicomachean ethics, you know, which was developed by Socrates, or some might want to prefer the ethical system of Marxism, for that matter, right? And we can, you know, then bring in Gandhi's ideas you know, of values, which is what I've done. So it is important for the student lens to be able to distinguish the different value systems which are already there and be able to identify how they serve us human beings, right? So if you're a political science student, you should be able to make reference to particular value systems which is relevant for whatever study and research you're actually involved in. Now, the question of universal values is highly problematic for me, because the students, like I was saying, might say to me that you're just being plain idealistic, or that I'm being deterministic, or that I'm being prescriptive. And that criticism would be very, very valid. So when we refer to universal values, we now also have to put in place, a set of thinking that's able to explain in a very understandable and appealing manner, right, what we actually understand by universal human values. And I was a reductionist in my own. I sort of referred to it through the concept of I used a very, very simple concept, which you might want to, most students might want to criticize me. I call it the culture of coexistence, right? Now, it's my responsibility to be able to define this culture of coexistence, right? So now, we, by our very nature, have the kind of ability, we have this template for language to be able to speak, although we speak in different languages, but we also have a built-in template, for human conduct, right? So we can sort of use that as a kind of starting point to be able to locate where do we begin with our understanding of universal values. Its erosion is as a consequence, again, of a list of things, including, the global logic of capitalism, right? It is also how we can shift our definitions of morality. We can very quickly use a new term, amoral, and we are able to escape, the accusation of being immoral. So what I'm saying is that human beings have the tendency to explain away something that might actually be defined by somebody else as very wrong and very unacceptable. So the question of relativity must also be answered in this understanding of when we actually referring to the erosion of human values, because we don't want to prejudice other people who might have a very different interpretation to values. Thank you. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you very much, sir. You have been extremely accommodating in answering all the questions which came towards the end of your session. And we really appreciate the kind of effort you have taken in rejoining with us despite problems. Thank you very much. Now we move ahead. Now I request Dr. Ila Mordu to formally welcome Professor Rajiv Jain to deliver the valedictory address. Thank you, Dr. Ila.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Can I talk now?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, ma'am. Honorable Vice Chancellor, dignitaries, deans, directors, professors, colleagues, students, and participants. Good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce. It's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Professor Rajiv Jain, Director, Culture and Cultural Relation of Pondicherry University. And he is an internationally well-known academician and awarded Doctor of Science from the Jivaji University, and held various administrative positions and holding the various research projects funded by CSIR, ICMR, UGC, and many more in the list. Guided more than 75 PhD theses and published 330 research papers, more than 330 research papers, and he is an expert in analytical chemistry, electroanalytical chemistry, environmental chemistry, and pharmaceutical analysis, working in the field of chromatography and the pharmaceutical analysis and environmental chemistry. President 103rd session of Indian Science Congress of Chemical Science Section and Chemical Sensor Research Leader Award 2014 are few of his awards from the long list of recognition for his work. Over to you, sir, Professor Rajiv Jain.
Thank you, Dr. Murgu. Now we request Professor Rajiv Jain to address.
Sir, could you please unmute, sir?
Sorry, I have to again. So good afternoon, distinguished speakers, Professor David Gangan, Professor Janathan Govinda, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gurneet Singh, Director, Professor Balakrishnan, Dean School of Social Science and International Studies, Professor Murthy, Professor Shaheen, Coordinator of the webinar, Head of the Department, Professor Nalli, my fellow colleagues, and dear participants. It is my pleasure to be here and listen to the lectures of learned speakers, which enlightened me, and I could know about Mahatma Gandhi much more than I was knowing earlier. It was also my pleasure to listen to the answers of the questions, and that was very brilliantly answered, and it increased the horizon of our knowledge. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The idea of praxis is a movement towards developing a professional practice of critical social work rescued from governmentality and managerialism by invoking what is called care of the self, care of the social worker and her clientelate. Instead of problem solving, the praxis invention approach aims at involving praxis potential and internationally rather than compliance. The praxis intervention is a social action sensitive to the human condition of plurality. The advocates of the philosophy of action research hold that it shares its base with Gandhian nonviolent civil resistance and social work. Gandhi was very much concerned with the plight of the common man. He felt that we must change the current state of affairs so that the poor man too can raise his head with dignity. He found three ways to do this. First, the gospel of love should be followed in place of that of hate. Second, violence should be replaced by self-suffering. Third, do put soul force against that of brute force. Therefore, replace greed by love, and everything will be all right. If this is followed in truth spirit, it will enhance the value of professional social work and enthuse others engaged in similar tasks to work with other people. As one tries to understand Gandhiji, the central theme of all that he attempted in his life was to reconstruct the society on a spiritual foundation. Life has to be value-based, and he, from his own search for truth and action in different forms and different fields, came upon the universal value of life. The most significant and inspiring icons of India's freedom movement was and would always remain Mahatma Gandhi. He had pulled off a preposterous idea, resistance to tyranny through mass, non-violent civil disobedience, or satyagraha in unspeakingly complex circumstances. India's remarkable victory against British would not have been possible without his unique mix of personal integrity, indomitable will, austerity, spiritual wisdom, and rare political acumen. The Mahatma believed poverty to be a country or community's biggest act of violence against its people. But 75 years after independence, more than half of our people remain poor. This is because India's political leadership continues to violate our code that Gandhi demonstrated to be essential for good governance. Corruption exists, is taken for granted even and is celebrated. Stealing is violence, breaking the law is violence, disrespect is violence, laziness is violence. But that token, we unquestioningly accept violence at home, in our streets, in our workplaces, and from those in public office. The Lord has spread through to the nation's marrow. India is ripe for another freedom struggle. It is a challenge to social workers to rise and restore our past glory. We should resolve to wage a war against the devils hidden within. We should learn to make peace with the world. We should spread joy amongst our fellow beings. The final lesson, which can be detected from the discussions, is do not perform any good action through bad means, thinking it is sufficient if it bears good fruit. In the end, I am thankful to the organizers, particularly Professor Murthy, Professor Nalli, Professor Shahin, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to listen to such an illustrious lectures and interacting them here, listening to their questions and answers, and giving me an opportunity to also speak few words at them. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ajit Jain. We have always had the blessings of your participation in all the programs we have been running for the last couple of years. It has been a pleasure having you. And you rightly said that we need to spread peace, we need to spread joy, and your values in this crisis COVID pandemic really matters. Thank you very much, sir. Since we've already had the question and answer session, now we move ahead with the presentation of the report of the webinar. I invite now Ms. Savida, PhD scholar from the Department of Social Work, Pondicherry University, to present the report of the webinar. On to you, Ms. Savida.
Hello.
Yes, Savida, you can speak.
Okay. Good evening, all. As part of celebrating 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, Department of Social Work of Pondicherry University conducted a one-day international webinar on Gandhian approach in social work practice, a way forward, on 27th August 2020 through the online platform of Google Meet. The webinar started with University Anthem. Professor R. Nalini, Head of the Department of Social Work, welcomed the dignitaries, resource persons, and the participants to the webinar formally. She expressed her hopes about the outcome of the webinar, where the participants will understand the model of Gandhiji of practicing what has been preached. Professor Gurneet Singh, Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University, delivered the presidential address. He has highlighted on Gandhian philosophy as a foundation for social work profession, especially enriching and empowering villages for bringing out the best of change. Dr. K. Anbu, Associate Professor of Department of Social Work, introduced Professor S. Balakrishnan, Director of Studies, Education, Innovation and Rural Construction, Pondicherry University. Professor B. Balakrishnan, S. Balakrishnan delivered the felicitation address. He has thrown light into what makes Gandhiji a theoretical and experimental scientist, and how modern researchers, scientists, and social workers can incorporate this. Followed by which Professor A. Shahin Sultana, Professor and convener of this webinar, explained the scope of the webinar, as in for rediscovering the indigenous social work philosophy and literature to focusing on Gandhian approaches and try to replace Western approaches as it is. Dr. C. Satish Kumar, Assistant Professor of Department of Social Work, introduced Professor P. Murthy, Dean of Social Science, School of Social Sciences and International Studies. Professor Murthy, who is the Nodal Officer of 150th birth anniversary celebration of Mahatma Gandhi, has highlighted the struggle Gandhi has experienced and how those struggles polished him to be a great leader to serve the society using non-violence principles. After which, Dr. Iftikhar Alam, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, introduced Mr. David Gengan, Chairperson, Peter Mattiskar Gandhi Memorial, South Africa. He has stressed upon the value of self-transformation and non-violence. He has highlighted how the vision of Gandhi, by becoming the change one wants to see in the world for harmonious life with the nature in the post-COVID era. It was followed by a very fruitful discussion and him responding to the questions asked by the participants. He stressed upon studying, involving and addressing the community's issues for universities to become the agent for social change. After which, Dr. P.B. Shankar Narayan, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, introduced Professor Jayantan Govender from KwaZulu-Natal University, South Africa. Professor Jayantan Govender spoke about Gandhi's treasure of values. He has highlighted the values of love of humanity, justice, tolerance, and freedom for cultural coexistence. He has thrown light into the importance of coordinated global action, which is required for peace, security, financial stability, and sustainable development. Dr. Ilamurugu, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, has introduced Professor Rajiv Jain. He has valedictory address was delivered by Professor Dr. Rajiv Jain, Director of Culture and Cultural Relations, Pondicherry University. He spoke about Gandhian principles to enhance the arena of professional social work, by which the webinar on Gandhian approach in social work practice, the way forward, is coming to a conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nafiza, for the detailed report of today's international webinar. With this, we almost come to the end of the webinar, and it's my turn to deliver the vote of thanks. So I take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Pondicherry University, Professor Gurneet Singh, who joined us with the webinar in the inaugural address, followed by the directors, SCI and RR, Professor S. Balakrishnan. All the three dignitaries graced the occasion and they did share their thoughts about the webinar, and it has been a wonderful support and also encouraging move for them to repeatedly support our department in all the initiatives from time to time. Thank you very much, sir. We also take this opportunity to thank Professor Jayantan and Mr. David, who despite technical glitches were able to do their presentation and join with us in this august audience. Thank you very much, Professor Jayantan and Mr. David. And you have been both accommodative in all responding to all the questions put forth by the audience. We also take this opportunity to thank the Dean, Professor P. Murthy of the School of Social Sciences and International Studies, for having given our department a chance to host this webinar, thereby discussing on Gandhi's life, thereby celebrating the 150th celebration of Gandhi. We also take this opportunity to thank Professor R. Nalini, the head of the Department of Social Work, who entrusted with me, along with other faculty colleagues, the responsibility to coordinate this webinar. In fact, she's been assisting me day and night, thereby giving inputs and also sharing responsibilities on par with other faculty members. So my heartfelt thanks to Professor Nalini, to Dr. Anbu, Dr. C. Satish Kumar, Dr. P.B. Shankar Narayan, Dr. Iftikhar Alam, and Dr. Ilam Murugu for helping me in coordinating the webinar successfully. This vote of thanks shall fall incomplete if I don't take this opportunity to thank all the scholars of our department, our office staff, Mr. Muthuswamy and Ms. Aravali, all the students of our Department of Social Work for helping us coordinating this webinar successfully. A special thanks to Father Remy, to Mr. Mohammed Nafi, to Mr. Hisham and Ms. Sabida, apart from all the other scholars who have worked with me 24/7 in what we could deliver today. My heartfelt thank and appreciation for all the four and all the other scholars for having helped us in giving what we thought of in this international webinar. I also take this opportunity to thank all the participants who registered immediately. In fact, we want to express our inability to accommodate all of them, but we've tried our best. So on first come, first basis, we've accommodated all of them. And the remaining are actually watching on YouTube live, and we are getting a lot of comments and queries on that also. My heartfelt appreciation to all the heads of the department, the deans of all the schools of our university, and all faculty members, senior colleagues, fellow colleagues, whom I can see appearing on the Google Meet now and then, including Professor Armugam and Professor Devendran from Mizoram, and many other faculty members who have joined despite their busy schedules for blessing us and gracing us with this occasion. Nevertheless, the whole appreciation goes to the team from the Department of Social Work, Pondicherry University, and also the authorities of our university, including the Dean, the directors, and the Honorable Vice Chancellor, along with the Registrar Ma'am, for supporting us in and out in facilitating, in organizing such excellent webinars on a day-to-day basis. My heartfelt thanks to one and all of you for participating and making this webinar a grand success. Thank you once again on behalf of the team, Department of Social Work, School of Social Sciences and International Studies, Pondicherry University. With this, I request the team to play the national anthem. Let us all rise for the national anthem. Thank you.
द्राविड उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमा जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
And thanks to all the members. The feedback link will be sent to your email ID and your e-certificate shall be issued accordingly. Thank you very much, one and all.
Thank you, Shine. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nalli ma'am. Thank you, Shaheen ma'am, and the entire team. Made it successful. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you. We are just waiting for the participants to move up and then we close the session.